Welcome back to another dark confession from the frozen wastes of Solstheim. Today, we're diving into something that most adventurers who visit this cursed island never live to understand: what really happens when you read one of Hermaeus Mora's black books. This isn't a story about power gained or knowledge earned. This is a warning about the price you pay when you touch those black-bound pages and let tentacles made of pure knowledge drag your soul into Apocrypha. The moment my fingers touched that book, I felt my consciousness being ripped from my body, leaving behind only a translucent shell tethered to reality by the thinnest thread of existence. Most mortals who read Hermaeus Mora's tomes are driven to permanent madness, their minds shattered by forbidden knowledge they were never meant to comprehend. I opened the book seeking power, but what I found was far more terrifying: the truth that every time I return to Apocrypha, less of me comes back, and eventually, nothing comes back at all. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. I need you to understand something before I lose what's left of myself. When my fingers first touched that black book in the depths of Ben-Conga-Reich, I felt my soul being torn from my flesh like wet paper ripping in half. My body stayed there in that frozen Dwemer ruin, but I was somewhere else entirely. And the worst part? A piece of me never came back. They call me a scholar now, a mage. Some even whisper that I'm touched by the Daedra, blessed with forbidden knowledge. They have no idea how right they are, and they have no idea what that blessing actually costs. The book was sitting on a pedestal in the deepest chamber of that ruin, wrapped in a black mist that moved against the wind. The leather binding felt wrong under my fingertips, slick and cold, like it had been pulled from something that had never been alive in the Quaird way we understand life. Later, I learned that cover was made from Lurker hide, creatures that dwell in the poisonous seas of a realm I shouldn't even know exists. The threads holding it together came from silk harvested in a place called the Spiral Skyne, Mephalah's domain. Even the paper inside was pressed from trees that have never seen the sun, written in ink that takes 10 years to brew, 10 years to make the ink for a single book. Think about that. What kind of power needs a decade just to prepare the tools to write itself down? I opened it anyway. Of course I did. You would have too, if you'd spent months tracking rumors of ancient knowledge through the ash storms of Solstheim. If you'd survived the Reeklings and the frost trolls and the madness that seems to seep from the very ground of that cursed island, I thought I was prepared for anything. The moment the pages fell open, tentacles erupted from the book itself. Not metaphorical tentacles, not some vision or hallucination, actual writhing appendages made of something that wasn't quite matter and wasn't quite magic, wrapping around my consciousness like hands dragging a drowning person under dark water. My vision went black, but I could still feel myself standing there in that chamber. I could feel the cold stone under my boots, the weight of my pack on my shoulders, the lingering warmth of the torchlight on my face. But I wasn't there anymore. When sight returned, I was standing on a platform made of something that looked like weathered stone but felt organic under my feet. All around me stretched an ocean of toxic green liquid, thick and oily, with massive tentacles breaching the surface like the world's most horrifying whales. The sky above was a swirling void of green clouds, with a massive maelstrom at its center, and through tears in that sky, I could see more tentacles emerging from portals that seemed to lead into an infinite darkness beyond. This was Apocrypha, the realm of Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric Prince of Knowledge and Fate, and I had just walked right into his library. But here's what the stories don't tell you, what the scholars who've only read about this place can't understand. When you enter Apocrypha through a black book, your body doesn't come with you. Back in Ben-Conga-Reich, in that Dwemer ruin, my physical form was still standing there, holding that book. Except it wasn't really me anymore. It was a translucent shell, a spectral anchor tethering my life force to Mundus by the thinnest possible thread. I learned later that if someone had walked by and seen me in that state, I would have looked like a ghost, barely there, trapped between worlds. That's the first trap. You see, the moment you read a black book, you're already caught. Your soul goes to Apocrypha, your body becomes a phantom, and the only thing keeping you alive is a connection so fragile that it feels like it could snap if someone breathed on it too hard. I started walking because standing still felt like an invitation for the tentacles in the water to reach up and grab me. The architecture of this place defied everything I understood about how buildings should work. Corridors stretched into impossible distances, made entirely of massive tomes stacked higher than any cathedral in Skyrim. The books themselves seemed to whisper as I passed, voices speaking in languages I had never studied but somehow understood anyway. That should have been my second warning that something was changing inside my head. The paths and bridges were constructed from this greasy black metal that moved. I'm not talking about mechanisms or pulleys. The bridges themselves would stretch and bend like living things, extending to create new routes or retracting to block my passage. It was like the realm itself was guiding me, pushing me towards something, or testing me to see if I was worthy of reaching whatever waited at the end. Then I met the Seekers. They appeared around a corner, these floating Daedra, wrapped in tattered robes that might have once been flesh. Their heads were masses of tentacles surrounding a single glowing eye, and they moved with this eerie grace that made them seem to glide rather than walk. I later learned they're the guardians of Hermaeus Mora's knowledge, security forces that patrol the endless libraries to protect secrets that could unravel mortal minds. I barely survived that first encounter. Magic that had worked perfectly in Skyrim felt sluggish here, like I was casting through thick water. My flames barely singed them. My ice spells shattered against some invisible barrier around their forms. It was only when I stumbled backward into an alcove that I found one of the fonts, these strange wall-mounted stations that pulsed with magical energy. Touching it refilled my magicka instantly, but it also felt like the realm itself was feeding me, sustaining me, making sure I had just enough power to continue forward, but never enough to feel truly safe. What do you think really happened there? Was the realm helping me, or was it just making sure its newest visitor would last long enough to reach the end? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I still don't know the answer. As I pressed deeper into this chapter of Apocrypha, I started to notice the darkness. Certain corridors and chambers were filled with this consuming shadow that would creep across the floor like living ink. The first time I stepped into it, the pain was immediate and overwhelming. It wasn't just hurting my body back in Skyrim, it was draining something essential, something that existed deeper than flesh and bone. I had to find sources of light, these floating wisp-like creatures that Apocrypha seemed to generate specifically to illuminate these dark zones. Without them, the shadows would have consumed me entirely. The Lurkers were worse than the Seekers. These massive creatures would occasionally breach the surface of the poisonous waters, their bodies a horrifying fusion of humanoid form and deep-sea nightmare. When they spotted me, they would lumber onto the platforms with surprising speed for something so huge, their attacks powerful enough to send me flying across the greasy metal walkways. And if I got too close to the water's edge, tentacles would whip up from below, striking with enough force to shatter bone. I lost track of time. That's another thing they don't warn you about. Time in Apocrypha doesn't work the same way it does in Tamriel. Neloth, that Telvanni wizard who studies these books, claims some black books are from the ancient past, while others are from the future. When you're a Daedric Prince of Fate, apparently the timeline is just another book in your library that you can flip through at will. I might have been in that realm for hours, or days, or minutes. My body back in Skyrim didn't age, didn't hunger, didn't move. It just stood there like a statue made of smoke and memory, waiting for my tacically consciousness to return, if it ever would. Eventually, I reached a word wall, but it wasn't carved by mortal hands or even by the ancient Nords who built most of the walls scattered across Skyrim. This wall was written directly into reality by Hermaeus Mora himself. Knowledge branded into existence by a being that exists beyond the normal constraints of creation. Reading it felt like having information poured directly into my skull, bypassing my eyes and ears entirely. I learned a word of power, but I also felt something fundamental shift inside my understanding of the world. That's when I realized what was really happening. This wasn't just about gaining power or learning secrets. Every step through Apocrypha, every word I read, every piece of forbidden knowledge I absorbed was changing me at a level so deep that I wasn't sure I could ever be the same person who had opened that book. The final chamber of this chapter rose before me, a massive cathedral-like structure with ceiling so high it disappeared into the green void above. And there, on a pedestal in the center, sat another book. This one was glowing with an inner light, and I could feel the pull of it from across the room, promising power beyond anything I had ever imagined. But I could also feel something watching me. Not the Seekers or the Lurkers, something infinitely larger, infinitely more patient. Hermaeus Mora himself was observing me from those portal tentacles in the sky, his countless eyes fixed on this newest mortal who had stumbled into his domain. I approached the pedestal. My hands were shaking. I want to tell you I hesitated, that I considered turning back, finding some other way to return to Skyrim without accepting whatever this book was offering. But I didn't hesitate. That's the truth I have to live with. I reached out and opened that glowing book, and the knowledge inside flooded into me like boiling water poured into a glass that was already too full. I felt my mind expand in ways that shouldn't be possible, gaining abilities and understanding that no amount of study or practice could have given me. The power was real, immediate, and intoxicating. When I touched the book to return to Solstheim, the transition back felt like being ripped through a tunnel made of razor wire. One moment I was standing in Apocrypha, the next I was gasping for breath in that Dwemer ruin, my body solid again, my heart hammering in my chest like it was trying to escape my ribcage. The black book snapped shut in my hands, that black mist curling around it like satisfied smoke. I should have thrown it away right then. I should have sealed that chamber and never spoken of what I had experienced. But the book stayed with me, tucked into my pack, and I could feel its presence like a second heartbeat. The changes started small. I would be walking through Raven Rock or camping under Solstheim's ash-filled sky, and I would hear whispers in languages that shouldn't exist. Sometimes I would close my eyes and see glimpses of Apocrypha's endless libraries, like after images burned into my vision. I told myself it was just residual magic, that it would fade with time. It didn't fade. It got stronger. 3 days after my first visit to Apocrypha, I found another black book. This one was hidden in the remains of a Nordic ruin, sitting in a locked room like someone had tried to contain it and failed. The rational part of my mind screamed at me to leave it alone, to remember the horror of being separated from my own body, the terror of walking through a realm where even the architecture wanted to consume me. I opened it anyway, and this time, when the tentacles pulled my consciousness across the veil, part of me was relieved, like coming home to a place I had never wanted to call home. Hermaeus Mora spoke to me on that second visit. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a sound like pages turning in an empty library mixed with the wet sliding of things moving through deep water. He appeared as a mass of eyes and tentacles emerging from one of those portals in the sky, and just looking at him made my head ache with the weight of incomprehensible knowledge. He knew me. He called me by name, though I had never introduced myself. He knew why I had come to Solstheim, what I was searching for, what I feared most in the deepest parts of my heart that I never acknowledged even to myself, and he was pleased with me. That's when I understood the real trap. The black books aren't just doorways to gain power, they're recruitment tools. Hermaeus Mora created them specifically to lure mortals like me into his service, to identify the ones hungry enough for knowledge that we would trade everything for it. Each book is a test, and every time we pass, every time we survive the gauntlets of Apocrypha and claim the knowledge at the end, we prove ourselves worthy of being shaped into something useful to the Prince of Fate. Just like Miraak, I learned about him through fragments of knowledge I picked up in Apocrypha, through whispers from the realm itself, and later from the terrified Skal who spoke of him as the traitor. Miraak was the first Dragonborn, a dragon priest from the Merethic era who discovered a black book and became Hermaeus Mora's champion. Mora taught him the Bend Will shout, a power so forbidden and dangerous that it could force dragons themselves to submit. With that knowledge, Miraak turned on his dragon masters and devoured their souls, growing stronger with each kill. But Hermaeus Mora doesn't give gifts without chains attached. When Miraak tried to use his power to escape the dragons entirely, when he refused to help the ancient Nord heroes fight Alduin, the Prince of Knowledge made sure Miraak could never truly leave. After Miraak was defeated by Valak in a battle that supposedly tore Solstheim away from mainland Skyrim, Hermaeus Mora saved him from death by pulling him completely into Apocrypha. Miraak had been trapped there for thousands of years, a prisoner in an infinite library, his power and knowledge growing but his freedom forever out of reach. And Mora had been patient, using his champion for whatever purposes suited a being who could see the past and future as clearly as we see the present. I kept finding black books, 7 of them total across Solstheim, each one leading to a different section of Apocrypha, each one offering different rewards, and I read every single one of them. By the 3rd book, I noticed something terrifying. I would be back in Tamriel, going about normal life, and I would find myself thinking in patterns that weren't quite my own, making connections between events and knowledge that required understanding things I had never studied, speaking words in the dragon language that I shouldn't know without feeling like I was learning them, more like I was remembering them. Hermaeus Mora was still in my head. The separation between Apocrypha and Mundus was becoming thinner for me with each visit. By the 5th book, I started to forget small things about my life before Solstheim. What had driven me to become a scholar in the first place? What had my childhood been like? I knew I must have had one, everyone does, but the memories were becoming foggy, like trying to remember a dream 3 days after waking. The knowledge from the books was replacing my personal history. Forbidden understanding of cosmic truths was overriding the mundane details of a mortal life that Hermaeus Mora had no use for. I met others who had read the black books. Most of them were completely insane, their minds shattered by trying to process information that mortal brains simply aren't built to contain. They would stand in corners and whisper to themselves, or wander the ash wastes of Solstheim, repeating fragments of things they had read in languages that hurt to hear spoken aloud. A few had managed to maintain enough sanity to function, but they had the same look in their eyes that I saw when I caught my reflection in still water, a look that said we weren't entirely present in our own bodies anymore. And then there was Storn Cragstrider, the shaman of the Skal. He understood what the black books were better than most scholars. His people had kept their sacred knowledge hidden from Hermaeus Mora for generations, understanding that the Prince of Knowledge would stop at nothing to claim it. Storn tried to warn me about what I was becoming, about the price that all of Mora's servants eventually pay. I didn't listen, or maybe I couldn't listen anymore. The pull of the books was too strong, the promise of understanding everything too seductive. If you've ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, if someone offered you the power to reshape reality, but it meant slowly losing yourself in the process, tell me in the comments what you think you would do, because I thought I was strong enough to take the power and walk away unchanged. I thought I was different from all the others who had fallen into Mora's trap. I was wrong. The 7th Black Book led me to a place called the Summit of Apocrypha. This wasn't like the other chapters of the realm. This was Hermaeus Mora's sanctum, the heart of his infinite library, where the most dangerous and powerful knowledge was kept. And waiting there for me was Miraak himself. He looked down at me from a platform above, wearing armor made from the scales of dragons he had killed and devoured. His mask was a golden artifact of terrible beauty, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and bitter servitude. Miraak mocked me, called me weak, said I had barely scratched the surface of what a dragonborn could truly become. But beneath his arrogance, I heard something else. Desperation. He had been planning his escape from Apocrypha for centuries, and he needed my soul to do it. By absorbing my power as Dragonborn, he believed he could finally become strong enough to break free from Hermaeus Mora's chains. We fought across multiple levels of that impossible architecture, dragons that Miraak had enslaved joining the battle. Every time I seemed to gain the upper hand, he would do something I had never seen before, shout words of power with no delay between them, absorb the souls of his own dragon servants to heal himself. He was showing me what I could become if I gave myself completely to this pursuit of knowledge and power. He was showing me my future. But when Miraak tried to escape at the end, when he used his magic to flee from our final confrontation, Hermaeus Mora appeared. The Daedric Prince manifested as a massive concentration of tentacles and eyes, and he simply reached out and impaled Miraak through the chest, lifting him into the air like a child's toy. Mora's voice was almost gentle as he explained that Miraak had harbored fantasies of rebellion, that after thousands of years of service, the first Dragonborn had outlived his usefulness. And then, with casual indifference to the life he was ending, Hermaeus Mora drained Miraak of everything he was and let his body dissolve into ash. Then, the Prince of Knowledge turned to me, and he welcomed me as his new champion. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from Skyrim, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. I want to tell you that I refused Hermaeus Mora's offer, that I found some way to escape, to break the cycle that had consumed Miraak and countless others before him. But I'm writing this confession from a tower in Tel Mithrin, and I can feel Apocrypha pulling at the edges of my consciousness even now. The black books are still in my possession. I still open them, because here's the truth that nobody tells you about forbidden knowledge. Once you understand certain things, you can't go back to not understanding them. Once you've seen how the threads of fate connect across time, once you've read words written by a being that exists outside mortal comprehension, your mind doesn't fit back into the shape it used to be. You're fundamentally changed at a level deeper than flesh or bone or even soul. I returned to Solstheim after defeating Miraak, and everyone celebrated. The Skald were free from his influence. The people of Raven Rock could sleep without being enslaved to rebuild his temple, and I was hailed as a hero. They gave me rewards, offered me hospitality, treated me like I had saved them from a great evil. None of them noticed that I wasn't entirely there anymore. The first time I realized something was deeply wrong was about a week after Miraak's death. I was eating a meal at the retching Netch, and someone asked me where I was from originally. I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. Not because I didn't want to tell them, but because I genuinely couldn't remember. The memories were gone, replaced with formulas for summoning Daedric entities and the true names of stars that died before Nirn was created. I tried to write down everything I could remember about my life before Solstheim, thinking that maybe if I documented it, I could preserve some part of who I used to be. But my hands wouldn't cooperate. Every time I tried to write about my childhood, or my family, or the simple mundane details that make up a person's identity, the words on the page would shift. They would become passages from books I had read in Apocrypha, knowledge about the nature of reality that Hermaeus Mora had decided was more important than my personal history. He was editing me, rewriting my identity to better serve his purposes. The whispers got worse. I would be walking through Raven Rock and suddenly hear Mora's voice commenting on someone's fate, revealing secrets about their future that I had no right to know. A merchant would pass me on, the street, and I would know with absolute certainty that he would die in 3 months from a netch sting. A child would run by, and I would see the entire map of their life spreading out before them, every choice and consequence laid bare. I tried to warn some of them. The merchant, I told him to avoid the northern roads. He laughed and called me paranoid. 3 months later, his body was found exactly where Mora's whispers had shown me it would be. I stopped trying to warn people after that. What's the point of knowing the future if fate itself has already decided the outcome? The dreams started around the same time, except they weren't really dreams. They were visits. My consciousness would slip away from my sleeping body and find itself back in Apocrypha, walking those endless corridors even though I hadn't touched a black book. Hermaeus Mora would appear and speak to me about his plans, about knowledge he was gathering, about other mortals in other lands who had caught his attention. He treated me like a colleague, like a trusted servant who had earned the right to understand the scope of his machinations. And the worst part? I was fascinated. Even knowing what it was costing me, even watching myself dissolve piece by piece, I wanted to know more. That's the real trap. It's not that Hermaeus Mora forces you to serve him. It's that he makes you want to serve him. He shows you just enough of the infinite knowledge he possesses that you become addicted to understanding more. Every answer he gives spawns 100 new questions, and the only way to find those answers is to go deeper into his service, to give up more of yourself until there's nothing left but a shell filled with knowledge that isn't even yours anymore. I started avoiding mirrors. When I did catch my reflection, my eyes looked wrong. The color was the same, but there was something behind them that wasn't quite human anymore. Something that watched and calculated and understood things that mortal minds were never meant to comprehend. My magic changed too. Spells that I had practiced for years suddenly felt crude and inefficient. I would cast them and know with absolute certainty that there were better ways, more efficient methods that drew on fundamental forces that most mages never even suspected existed. The magic that came naturally to me now was closer to what the Seekers used, reality-bending techniques that felt more like negotiations with the fabric of existence than traditional spell work. People started avoiding me. They would make excuses not to talk with me, cross the street when they saw me coming, refuse to meet my eyes. Some instinctive part of them recognized that I wasn't quite right anymore, that something about my presence was fundamentally wrong in a way they couldn't articulate but could definitely feel. I went back to the black books, of course. I told myself I needed to understand what was happening to me, that maybe if I learned enough, I could find a way to reverse it. But that was a lie. I went back because I needed to go back, because the pull of Apocrypha had become as essential as breathing. Each time I read one of the books, less of me came back. I could feel it happening, feel pieces of my identity and personality being left behind in that realm, like belongings forgotten in a hotel room. My preferences for certain foods disappeared. My emotional reactions to things became muted and strange, like I was remembering how to feel rather than actually feeling. The voices of people I had once cared about became indistinguishable from the voices of strangers. Hermaeus Mora was consuming me, but he was doing it so slowly and carefully that I could watch it happen. And I think that's intentional. I think he wants his servants to be aware of what they're losing, because that awareness itself is a form of knowledge, and knowledge is what he feeds on. I tried to resist. By the gods, I tried. I took the black books and sealed them in a chest, threw the key into the sea of ghosts, and swore I would never touch them again. I lasted 4 days before I dove into those freezing waters and spent 6 hours searching the ocean floor until I found that key. My body was hypothermic, my fingers bleeding from scraping across the rocks, but I got the chest open and I read the book inside with the same desperate hunger that drives a skooma addict to their next dose. That's when I finally understood what Miraak's last words had meant. When Hermaeus Mora killed him, Miraak had said, "May he be rewarded for his service as I am." I had thought it was just bitter sarcasm, a dying man mocking his replacement, but it was also a warning. This is the reward. This slow dissolution of self, this transformation into a living repository of knowledge that serves the Prince of Fate's purposes. This is what champions of Hermaeus Mora receive. And the most terrifying part? I can feel myself starting to accept it. The human parts of me that scream and fight and resist are getting quieter every day, drowned out by the vast ocean of forbidden knowledge that Mora is pouring into the space where my personality used to be. Soon, I won't remember why I ever wanted to be anything other than what I'm becoming. I'm writing this now while I still can, while there's still enough of the original me left to form these words and care about warning others. If you're Dragonborn, if you've been drawn to Solstheim by rumors of power or knowledge, please listen to me. The black books are real, the power they offer is real, and the price is higher than you can possibly imagine. You don't just read black books, they read you. They examine every part of who you are, catalog your desires and fears and weaknesses, and then they report all of that back to Hermaeus Mora. And he is patient, he has all of eternity to wait for you to become exactly what he needs you to be. Miraak spent thousands of years trying to escape and failed. I've been Mora's champion for less than a year, and I can already feel the chains settling into place. The books call to me constantly now, their whispers promising answers to questions I didn't even know I had. And every time I resist, the pull gets stronger. Sometimes I stand at the edge of Solstheim's coast and look out at the water, wondering if I should just walk into the sea. End this before I become something that would use the knowledge Mora gave me to hurt people or to serve purposes I can't even understand yet because my transformation isn't complete, but I won't. Because even now, even knowing everything I know, part of me wants to see what comes next, wants to understand what I'll become when the process is finished, wants to know what Hermaeus Mora has planned for me that required destroying who I used to be to create. That's how you know the transformation is almost complete. When you stop fighting and start analyzing your own destruction with the detached curiosity of a scholar examining an interesting specimen. The books are on my desk right now, all 7 of them, arranged in a circle, their black mist intertwining like smoke from 7 candles burning with cold fire. They're waiting for me to open them again, and I will. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, but definitely soon, because I can't remember anymore why I wouldn't want to. Fellow Dragonborn, whoever you are, wherever you are, this is my warning and my confession and my epitaph. The moment you touch those black-bound pages, the moment tentacles wrap around your consciousness and pull you into Apocrypha, you begin dying. Not quickly, not cleanly, but slowly, piece by piece, until everything that made you who you were has been consumed by the infinite hunger of the Prince of Knowledge. And Hermaeus Mora? He's patient. He has all of time itself to watch you transform, to study how you break and bend and finally surrender to becoming exactly what he needs. I can feel him watching me even now as I write these final words. His eyes are always there, in the corners of rooms, in the spaces between thoughts, in the reflection that doesn't quite match the person looking in the mirror. You don't escape Hermaeus Mora. You don't outsmart him or outrun him or outlast him. You just choose how long you want to pretend you're still free before you accept what you really are. His servant, his tool, his book, being written 1 page at a time, 1 memory sacrificed at a time, until the story of who you were becomes just another forgotten text in his infinite library. The black books are open on my desk. The whispers are calling, and I'm walking toward them right now, even as I finish writing this. Because that's what champions of Hermaeus Mora do.